What's going on, man? Tell him no. Tell him no. Salute to everybody. Shout out to everybody for tapping in for this early morning show. Let's go. Let's go. Once again, it's your boy King Supreme in the building, back at you with some more content. It is Monday, January 5th, 2026. I almost said 2025, but we're already in 26. So I had to catch myself with that when I said, oh, 2026. 2025 is done and over with. Yeah, man. Just one of them things. So today, you see the title. We're going to talk about Mexico erasing its blackness. Now, you all know that a lot of history, a lot of black history in Mexico has been erased from the history books. But when you have Spanish conquistadors running the country, that's what happens. That is what happens. So Mexicans cannot deny this because we all know that white Europeans are the ones who really call the shots in Mexico, not the melanated Aboriginal people. You know, the pale skinned Europeans call the shots in Mexico. Let's just be real about that. Right? Just like the pale faces in the United States of America, they're the ones who call the shots. It's no different in Mexico. So the British here in America, they've erased a lot of black history in the Americas, period. Well, in the United States, and then the Spaniards, of course, have erased a lot of stuff that took place in Mexico and Central America, South America. You know, you get it. Reuben Williams, what's popping? Hit that like button, man. We are here. Let's get it in. Salute to everybody. Hopefully, you guys love the content, and we're gonna dive right into it. Soon as we get into the five, soon as we hit the 5 minute mark, we're gonna dive right into the content. We're gonna let some more people dive up in here, then we're gonna get into the conversation, man. You know what I mean? For sure. Yes, sir. Caesar, 1980s. Yes, sir. Tell him no. Bronze Warrior. What's popping, Bronze Warrior? I see you got that all Mac picture. That's what's up. Didn't know anything about blacks in Mexico if it wasn't for red. Yeah, man, and that's the crazy thing about it. I put a lot of people up on game about blacks in Mexico. A lot of people didn't know about the history. They didn't know about black Mexicans. Why? Because Mexico has hid those people. You know what I mean? And it's just one of those things. A lot of people wasn't aware that Mexico had a black population. The black population in Mexico would be a whole lot bigger. But check this out: those people were deprived of education, a thriving economy. They were deprived of equality, and for the most part, Mexico did everything in their power to ignore that population, which is why the Afro-Mexican population, well, they call them Afro-Indigenous, they barely got added to the Constitution. They barely got added to the census like 15 years ago. So if you've been in the country for centuries and you barely get added to the Constitution 10, 15 years ago, so it shows you how deprived that community is of resources and a long list of other things. Mexico barely acknowledged their existence and put them in the Constitution and put them in the census. So if that ain't anti-blackness, then what is? You got a whole race of people down there that Mexico has ignored that particular group of people for centuries. And keep in mind, like I said it before, the second president of Mexico was a black man, Vincent Guerrero. He abolished slavery. He played a role in Mexico gaining their independence from Spain. And how do you repay his people? You keep them out of the Constitution. You keep them out of the census so that they can suffer economically, so that they can suffer socially. No equality. living way below poverty, way below the poverty lines in that country. So hit the like button and salute to the game, family. Let's dive right into the conversation. We 5 minutes in. Let's get into the content.
Latin America that privileges whiteness, and you're sort of the bottom if you're black.
About this, the scandal that rocked the city of Los Angeles. Several Latino members. All right, all week you've heard about this, the scandal that rocked the city of Los Angeles after several Latino members of the city council were caught on tape making racist comments.
The fact that there is a system, there's pigmentocracy in Latin America that privileges whiteness, and you're sort of the bottom if you're black or indigenous. That's very real.
Who you gonna call?
Huh?
Who are you gonna call?
Immigration.
For what?
For you.
Why?
Because you're not legal.
In early 2022, a scandal erupted in Mexico City that exposed an ugly truth the country had been trying to hide. Several employees of an upscale steakhouse came forward with a damning allegation. The restaurant had a policy of segregating customers based on their skin color. The best tables were reserved for lighter-skinned individuals. Within days, activists mounted a boycott, and the city launched an investigation.
And this was Mexico City. I want y'all to listen to this again. Hear me out. And I got this from Black Stories Untold. Shout out to Black Stories Untold. Make sure that you subscribe to that channel. That's a dope channel where they talk about a lot of hidden Black history. Why Mexico is erasing all Black people.
Who you gonna call?
Huh?
Who are you gonna call?
Immigration.
For what?
For you.
Why?
Because you're not legal.
In early 2022, a scandal erupted in Mexico City that exposed an ugly truth the country had been trying to hide. Several employees of an upscale steakhouse came forward with a damning allegation. The restaurant had a policy of segregating customers based on their skin color. The best tables were reserved for lighter-skinned individuals. Within days, activists mounted a boycott, and the city launched an investigation. The restaurant in question, however, denied everything. But for millions of dark-skinned Mexicans, this wasn't shocking.
Of course they're going to deny it. That's what Mexicans do. When you talk about racism that comes from their community, they deny it. They're not going to admit it. No, that's not true. So don't let them fool you when they say, no, it's not true. It is true. They'll gaslight you and make it seem like you're just crying about something that doesn't exist. Nah, man, don't let these people fool you. Anti-Blackness, they have normalized anti-Blackness in Latin America. So when they're being racist towards you, they don't even acknowledge it because they've been doing it for so long. And when you call it out, they say, oh, you're just playing the race card. That is how they gaslight you.
News. It was just another Tuesday. You see, Mexico has a problem it doesn't want to talk about. A problem so deeply embedded in its society that until 2019, the country didn't even officially acknowledge that Black Mexicans existed.
People in Mexico.
Black people existed prior to 2019. They kept them out of the Constitution and out of the census. So it shows you how racist that place actually is. It's more racist than America, the United States of America. Blacks did a lot in Mexico, and you barely added them to the census in 2019. And if you didn't know no better, these Mexicans said, no, it's not true. Look it up for yourself. Anti-Blackness is embedded in their culture. You barely added the Black population to the census in 2019. Come on, guys, you're not fooling anybody. When you study the history, they can't gaslight you because they'll pretend like it's not true if you don't know no better. No, sir. No, it's not true.
Society that until 2000, dark-skinned Mexicans. This wasn't shocking news. It was just another Tuesday. You see, Mexico has a problem it doesn't want to talk about. A problem so deeply embedded in its society that until 2019, the country didn't even officially acknowledge that Black Mexicans existed.
Black people in Mexico were not even acknowledged until recent years. Their presence was not acknowledged by the government up until very recent years. But yet, they have been there since days of slavery.
Think about that. In a country of 127 million people, where over 2.5 million citizens identify as Black or Afro-Mexican, it took until 2019 for the federal constitution to recognize them as a people. But here's where it gets even darker.
So what does that tell you? Now, if Mexico barely acknowledged the existence of Afro-Mexicans, If that don't prove how racist they are in Mexico, I don't know what will. Come on, man.
According to Afro-Mexican activist Yolanda Camacho Calleja, many Black Mexicans deliberately avoid identifying as Afro-Mexican in official censuses, fearing the discrimination that comes with being labeled as Black. When you look at what they're trying to...
You get a lot of people who hate watch me. This is why you have 170 something viewers and 60 some likes. We get a lot of hate watchers, right? That proves it.
Escape. The data tells a brutal story. If you're a dark-skinned Mexican, you'll likely complete only 6.5 years of schooling. Your light-skinned counterpart, they'll get 10 years. That's a staggering 45% gap in educational achievement. While there are many factors that make up that statistic, we can all acknowledge that the numbers are real.
The numbers are real. I've been telling you guys, man. And then you got Mexicans who come in here and pretend like I'm just making this up. I have the stats. I have the facts to prove what I'm saying. Everything that I say, you can do your own homework. You can do your research and come up with the same answers. I'm not, it'd be one thing. It'd be something if I was just making this up, but no, you could fact check everything I'm saying. You're like, whoa, that was actually true. Exactly. Because if it wasn't true, I wouldn't say it.
And it's a problem, but it doesn't stop there. While the average Mexican household brings in about $193 a month, dark-skinned citizens earn just $137, a crushing 41.5% less than their white compatriots. This isn't some accidental oversight. This isn't just lingering prejudice. This is systematic erasure, a deliberate whitening of Mexican society. Now that's a very controversial statement, I know, but the truth is
that goes on all across Latin America. If you look at what is that? What's that country down in South America? Argentina. Argentina eradicated their Black population. That's how racist they was in Argentina. And that's happened in a lot of Latin American countries. A lot of that Black history been erased on purpose.
This problem stretches back to colonial times, continuing to shape the lives of Mexicans today. And to understand how Mexico got here, how a country that proudly declares itself a cosmic race of mixed heritage could systematically discriminate against its Black citizens, we need to go back, way back, to a time when the Spanish Empire was...
Look at Mija la Raza. Hopefully I'm saying it right. Mija la Raza. That's what that means, is to whiten up the race. White is right and Black is wrong. That mentality has been spread all across Latin America. Don't let these modern day conquistadors fool you like you're just making this up. Y'all see these, you see these wannabe Spanish conquistadors in my comment section all the time, pretending like I'm just making things up when you can fact check everything I'm saying for yourself and you're gonna come up with the same answers. No, that's not true. Red is just making up things. It's not there's no racism against Blacks in Mexico. Okay, so Mexico barely added Blacks to the census in 2019, and Blacks been in Mexico for centuries, and you mean to tell me that's not racism? You mean to tell me that's not anti-Blackness? Mexico literally tried to erase the existence of Blacks in Mexico.
Carving up the Americas, and a complex system of racial hierarchy would plant the seeds for centuries of discrimination to come. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You want the cold, hard truth, don't you? That's why you're watching our channel. Let's dive in. Mexico loves to paint itself as a post-racial paradise.
That is a bold-faced lie.
Place where everyone is just Mexican. In 2010,
that's a bold-faced lie, where everybody is just Mexican and race don't matter. Come on, homie, it ain't just Mexico. This mentality is all over Latin America. The erasure of Black culture, the erasure of Black history.
CONAPRED, Mexico's own National Council to Prevent Discrimination, conducted its first national survey on discrimination. Despite being the federal agency specifically tasked with fighting discrimination, their survey painted a very specific picture of Mexico. According to them, age, gender, and social class were supposedly the main factors affecting people's daily lives. But here's the shocking part. This government body, whose entire purpose is to prevent discrimination, didn't even mention Afro-Mexicans or the discrimination they face in their survey. Think about that. In a government study specifically designed to measure discrimination, Black Mexicans were so invisible, they weren't even counted. The irony gets deep.
Yeah, they wasn't even counted in the census. Black Mexicans were literally invisible. No, there's no racism in Mexico. Man, shut up.
When Mexico's National Institute of Statistics and Geography finally did survey attitudes about race, the results exposed the myth of Mexico's colorblind society. 21% of women and 24% of men wouldn't rent a room to an Afro-descendant person. 11% of women and 12% of men openly admitted they would oppose their child marrying a Black person.
They're not going to admit that publicly. That's something that that's something they speak about in private, right? This is just the reality of it. If Mexico, we ain't gonna say if, because they did. Mexico barely added they barely added their Black people to the census in 2019. So that speaks volumes. What does that say? What does that actually mean? Well, it means that they don't want Blacks in their society, since they refuse to acknowledge their existence for centuries. So that points to a bigger problem, which is anti-Blackness, which is the erasure of Black culture and their contributions to the country. Because keep in mind, you think about Blacks in Mexico fighting at the border, helping to protect the border. You think about Blacks like Gaspar Yanga fighting off the Spanish military. Vincent Guerrero fighting off the Spanish military. Vincent Guerrero, also known as El Negro, abolished slavery in Mexico. He played a major role in helping Mexico to gain their independence. So Black people did all that in Mexico, and you got to think about other things that they built, things that they created that they never got credit for. So Blacks have been contributing to the progress of Mexico for centuries, but you barely add them to the census in 2019. That points to the bigger problem. What is the bigger problem? That is anti-Blackness. Anti-Blackness is embedded in Mexico culture. It is embedded in Latin American culture. This right here is one of many examples that I could use to prove my point about the high level of their anti-Blackness that's embedded in their society. So follow me with the content. Make sure that you guys get the likes up. Don't hate watch. Don't be a cloud watcher. Don't be a gang goofy Gilligan. Bless that like button.
56% of those surveyed acknowledged that the rights of Afro-descendant people were respected, little or not at all. Yet despite this data, Mexico's government continued to deny the problem. Even the country's president, in a moment of astounding tone deafness.
You got a Mexican in my comments saying, stop pushing hate. But you notice he's not talking about the hate that's promoted in his country. I'm showing you the hate that's promoted in your country. The anti-Blackness that's in your country. And I told you, Mexicans will gaslight you. When you point out something that they're doing, they'll flip it and say, you're the one that's being racist. You're the one that's spreading hate. But he refused to acknowledge the anti-Blackness in his country. Mexico barely added Black people to the census 2019. Why don't you go to Mexico and tell them to stop spreading hate? Why don't you go to Mexico and tell them to stop practicing anti-Blackness? But it's mighty funny here, bring his dumb ass up in here and gaslight me as if I'm saying something is wrong. When everything I'm saying, you can literally fact check everything I'm saying. He won't go to Mexico and tell them to stop promoting hate, to stop practicing racism. He ain't gonna do that. He rather come in my comment section under a fake profile and attempt to gaslight me.
Declared that racial mixing was the future of humanity. But here's the thing about myths. They crumble when faced with cold, hard data. Let's break down the numbers. Mexico's National Institute of Statistics found that when you look at white-collar office jobs, 27% of these positions are held by white Mexicans. But in the agricultural sector, white Mexicans make up only 5% of workers. Think about that gap. It's not random chance. Even when dark-skinned Mexicans get an education, they face systematic barriers to professional advancement. And
it's funny when they get up in here, they come up in here and pretend and they act clueless, like they don't know what's going on in their country. As if I'm making up these things, as if you can't fact check everything that I've said. What did I tell you guys in the beginning of this podcast? They come in here and they try to gaslight you. But when you're educated and you know your facts, you understand history, it is impossible for them to gaslight you. That's not going to work over here, buddy. I'm giving you the irrefutable facts. I'm giving you the historical and irrefutable facts. Your gaslighting is not going to work, sir.
Comes to basic necessities, the kind of things most people take for granted, the disparities are shocking. While only 2.5% of light-skinned Mexicans lack running water in their homes, that number jumps to 11% for dark-skinned citizens. Need a bathroom? Just 7.5% of white Mexicans don't have one at home. But if you're dark-skinned, that number soars to 20%. These are the kinds of stories that need to be told, the data that shatters race-blind myths. And if you're as passionate as I am about uncovering the truths others try to sweep under the rug, leave a like and comment to help show your support.
This is, and I had one Mexican dude said, "You're just showing YouTube videos." Yes, I'm showing YouTube videos of people who've done extensive research and background checks so that we're on point with the things that we're talking about. So I don't just show a YouTube video without doing my own homework and research. I've studied this for myself. So I know it to be a fact. Not my opinion, this is a known fact.
For the message we're trying to spread. But surely you might think this is about class, not race, about poor regions versus rich ones. That's exactly what many Mexicans argue, that dark-skinned citizens tend to live in historically disadvantaged areas. So of course the numbers look bad. Here's the thing though, when researchers controlled for every other factor, gender, age, region, even ethnic origin, skin color still emerged as the single most powerful predictor.
Make sure that you guys bless that like button as soon as you step in the door, for sure.
Of a person's wealth and education. But these aren't just numbers on a page. Want to see how this racism plays out in real life? In 2013, Aeromexico put out a casting call for a commercial, one simple requirement: Nadi Moreno, no dark-skinned people need apply.
And what's funny is they try their best to sweep this underneath the rug. They try their best to deny this. Why is it so hard for you people to be honest about what's really going on? I spoke on the firebombing that took place in East LA when the Mexicans firebombed the apartments of black people just for living in East LA. I had a Mexican tell me, no, that's not true. I said, you fool, look at the evening news. You ain't got to take my word for it. Look it up yourself. This fool came in my comment section and said I was just making that up. As if those Mexicans didn't firebomb the apartments of black people living in East Los Angeles, the Ramona Garden housing projects. As if I just made the whole thing up. No, Red, that's not true. Yes, it is true.
Just imagine that. Mexico's largest airline openly saying, if you're dark-skinned, you can't even pretend to be our customer on TV. Even more shocking, Mexican police have actually deported their own citizens to Haiti and Honduras, not because they did anything wrong, but simply because their skin was too dark to be real Mexicans. Think about that.
Think about that. No, Red, it's not true. Yes, it's true. I gave you the facts. Do your own research.
In a country that claims to be colorblind, you could be thrown out of your own homeland for being too black. To understand how Mexico got here, how a nation could deport its own citizens for being too dark, we need to...
Do you know that Mexico was sending black people to Haiti because they wanted to pretend like they weren't Mexicans? And they sent these people to Haiti, but when Haiti got those people, Haiti said, man, these people speak Spanish, man. These people ain't Haitian. Mexico was so racist against their black population that they started deporting their own citizens and sending their citizens to a foreign land. And what is the foreign land? The foreign land was Haiti. They was literally deporting Mexico's citizens and sending them to Haiti. That's how much they wanted to, that's how much Mexico wanted to get rid of their black population. Mexico has been in complete denial of their black history, which is why they barely added black people to the census in 2019.
Go back to the beginning, back to when the Spanish Empire first carved up the Americas and created a system of racial hierarchy so effective that its shadows still darken Mexico today. The year was 1519. Spanish conquistadors had just landed on Mexico's shores, and they brought...
Sarah is a Spanish conquistador, so never mind anything she's saying. She's just babbling. She's rambling. The facts doesn't support anything that she talks about. The facts don't support anything that she talks about. She's just babbling and rambling. She's a Spanish conquistador. At least a wannabe Spanish conquistador. Because if she took her behind to Spain, them Spanish people in Spain will not accept you. So, like I said, you're a wannabe Spanish conquistador. If you took your behind to Spain, they will never accept you for being Spanish. They will not.
With them two things that would forever change the country: an obsession with racial categorization and enslaved Africans to work their newly stolen lands. In fact, among the very first conquistadors who helped topple the Aztec Empire were 6 black men. From the very start, the Spanish colonizers were meticulous about categorizing. From the very start, conquistadors who helped topple stolen lands. In fact, among the very first conquistadors who helped topple the Aztec Empire were 6 black men. From the very start, the Spanish colonizers were meticulous about categorizing people by race.
Yes, because you got to think, the Moors, which were black people from Northern Africa, they ruled Spain for maybe like 6 centuries. I know they ruled for centuries. I don't know the exact number, but black people have conquered and ruled Spain for centuries. So Spanish people in Spain had a deep hatred for melanated black people, and they took that same anti-black hatred to Latin America, and they spreaded that hate everywhere they went. When they colonized the land, the first thing they did was say, you must hate black people, you must promote anti-blackness in your culture. And that is how the Spanish conquistadors brainwashed people all over Latin America with this anti-black mentality. Unfortunate, but very true. Make sure that you guys bless the like button. Don't be a gang goofy Gilligan, and make sure that you bless that like button.
Created what they called a caste system. Think of it as an elaborate racial hierarchy where the lighter your skin, the more rights you had. At the top, pure-blooded Spaniards born in Spain, called peninsulares. Below them, their children born in Mexico, known as criollos. And at the bottom, indigenous peoples and enslaved Africans. But here's where it gets interesting. The Spanish became obsessed with documenting every possible racial mixture. They even made paintings of these categories.
Yeah, I told you the Spanish conquistadors took that anti-blackness with them, and they indoctrinated the people of Mexico to have this hatred towards anybody with dark skin. Why do you think Mexico was deporting their own citizens, sending their own dark-skinned citizens to Haiti, to a foreign land? Haiti said, hey, man, these ain't Haitians. You better take these people back to Mexico.
Have a Spanish father and an indigenous mother? You're a mestizo. Spanish and African parents? You're a mulatto. Have a mulatto parent and a Spanish parent? Now you're a Morisco. The combinations went.
Shout out to bless the super chat. Let's get some people to bless that Cash App. We got 400 plus something people watching. If you're rocking, bless the Cash App. A lot of my old people, we're gonna bring in some new people. We got a lot of people who ain't rocking, who ain't really supporters of this channel for whatever reason, but we got a whole new crowd of people that's coming in to support this show. So you're going to see some new moderators. You're going to see some new supporters over here. And we're going to just get rid of the people who, like, if you show up every blue moon, then there's no reason to have a wrench on my channel. There ain't no love lost. You know what I mean? If you pop up every other month, then why have a wrench over here? Ain't no love lost. It's all gravy, baby. So we're bringing in new supporters and new moderators who will support the channel consistently. It's just all about having those type of people, not fly by night people who pop up every blue moon. I don't want people like that. So I've been noticing that for a minute. I just haven't said anything. But anyway, let's continue. Let's move on with the content. We are blessed. It's a beautiful day. Yes, we are blessed. 2026. Let's move forward.
On and on. Each with its own label, each with its own place in the hierarchy, and the stakes were high. Your caste determined everything: what jobs you could hold, where you could live, even what clothes you could wear. If you were lucky enough to have fair skin, you might be able to pass as someone from a higher caste. This created a perverse incentive that still echoes in Mexican society today. Mejorando la raza, improving the race by marrying someone lighter skinned than yourself.
Improving a race by marrying somebody white. Let's be real. Mija la raza means to whiten up the race. Don't mix with black people. Have babies with white people so that we can whiten up the race. Mija la raza.
Clothes you could wear. If you were lucky enough to have fair skin, you might be able to pass as someone from a higher caste. This created a perverse incentive that still echoes in Mexican society today.
Imagine Sarah, a Spanish conquistador, trying to talk about who don't have an identity, when blacks, we are the original people of planet Earth. We're the original people of planet Earth. Imagine imagine a wannabe Spanish conquistador trying to talk about identity. Shame on Sarah.
Mejorando la raza, improving the race by marrying someone lighter skinned than yourself. Between 1580 and 1650, nearly 250,000 Africans were forcibly brought to Mexico, primarily from what we now know as Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Congo, Angola, and Mozambique. By the early 1600s, Mexico's African slave population had grown larger than anywhere else.
Keep in mind, this is only partially true. This is partially true. If you study the history of Mexico, they had black people in Mexico prior to the Europeans showing up. The Europeans just happened to bring African slaves with them, right? But you already had a population of blacks in Mexico, which is why the blacks in Mexico now are acknowledged as Afro-Indigenous, because Mexico was full of different indigenous. Mexico was populated with different indigenous tribes. See, they wanted to make the Spanish conquistadors wanted people to believe that there was just one particular tribe of people that existed in Mexico. But when you study the history of Mexico, you learn that Mexico had different indigenous tribes. People with different phenotypes, people with different hair textures, skin complexions. So you had different indigenous. There was a lot of people in Mexico, right? And you know, not all of them looked the same, but they wanted to paint the picture where they tried to paint the picture like there was only one group of indigenous people, when in reality there were different groups of indigenous people who are indigenous to the land. Aboriginals. Listen, if you barely added blacks to the census in 2019, imagine how many things they lied about. When you lie about that, when you go out of your way to keep a particular group out of the census, that means that you're lying about something, you're hiding something. It proves that the people who run Mexico are liars and manipulators. Because if you barely add blacks to the census in 2019, that means you've been hiding a whole lot of things. When you go out of your way to erase history, that means that you're lying about something. So imagine just how much black history was erased in Mexico. And when you gain the understanding that they barely added blacks to the census, to the Constitution, maybe like 2019. So it shows you that Mexico been lying about their history and their black population for centuries. So how can you trust a group of people who will erase a whole nother group of people out of their history books? And then when the evidence becomes undeniable, you barely add them to the census in 2019.
In Latin America, when Mexico finally counted its African population in 1810, they made up more than 10% of the entire country. By comparison, actual Spaniards made up less than 1%. These enslaved Africans didn't just provide labor, they shaped the entire economy of New Spain. They worked in silver mines, sugar plantations, textile factories, and cattle ranches. In urban areas, they served as skilled artisans, vendors, and domestic workers. By 1570, they were so skilled at certain trades that...
You might say, why lie? Well, it's embedded in their history. It's embedded in their culture, I mean. It ain't just if a country goes out of their way to hide a particular population of people, you know that they've been lying about history. That is a clear indication that they've been lying about history for a very long time. That's exactly what that means.
Spanish guilds, fearing competition, actually banned them from practicing prestigious crafts like silk weaving. But perhaps most importantly, they brought with them knowledge and skills that would prove invaluable in the New World. Many came from regions with advanced agricultural techniques.
Like I said, you had black aboriginals in Mexico, then you had the Africans that they brought on slave ships. Seriously. Which is why you have blacks in Mexico that's acknowledged as Afro-Indigenous, when in reality they should just be called black aboriginals. Even though black was a word made up by Europeans, but we say that so that people understand the difference. You had melanated black people that are indigenous to the land, and you had maybe copper toned people, maybe people of a lighter complexion. But going back to the early days of Mexico, there were no European white people. You had bronze people and darker skinned people. You didn't have these Spanish conquistadors running around until the Spanish conquistadors showed up to colonize what? The land.
Expertise and military capabilities. This knowledge would soon become crucial for those who dared to resist the system, because not everyone accepted their place in this racial hierarchy. Among these rebels against Spanish tyranny, one man's story stands above all others, though you won't find him in Mexican textbooks today. His name was Gaspar Yanga, and he would lead one of the most successful slave rebellions in the Americas. Yet most Mexicans have never heard his name. Yanga was an enslaved African, believed to be of royal descent from Gabon, who arrived during the first wave of forced African migration to Mexico. He was one of the many the Spanish.
Gaspar Yanga went to war with the Spanish army. He defeated them in several battles in southern Mexico. Right? It's a part of their erasure. They don't want people to they don't want people to know about this history.
Trafficked from the shores of West Africa. By that point, Mexico's African population had grown so large it actually outnumbered the Spanish. In 1570, against the backdrop of growing tensions in colonial Mexico, Yanga orchestrated something that would shake the foundations of Spanish colonial power. At a time when enslaved Africans were being worked to death in sugar plantations, silver mines, and textile factories across New Spain, he led an uprising of enslaved people into the mountainous regions of Veracruz. This wasn't just an escape. It was an organized rebellion against the entire colonial system. The rebels became known as Chimarrones, and their very existence challenged Spanish authority in ways that would echo through generations.
Man, this is deep. This is some deep history, man, but you know, they don't talk about it.
These communities sprang up in the most remote and difficult terrain they could find, a strategy that wasn't just about hiding, but about survival and defense. The Spanish authorities quickly learned that these
Shout out to Mo Better for the super chat. I appreciate you.
Weren't just disorganized bands of fugitives. These were sophisticated settlements led by people who brought with them centuries of knowledge from West and West Central Africa. Now, that same expertise was being turned against them. The Cimarrones used their agricultural knowledge to establish sustainable food supplies, growing crops they knew from Africa. Their military experience helped them defend their settlements and even conduct strategic raids on Spanish caravans. But perhaps...
Yes, sir. You know, Gaspar Yanga, man, they put in a lot of work against the Spanish. You know what I mean? And it's crazy.
Most threatening to the Spanish authorities was how these communities preserved and maintained their African cultural traditions. While enslaved people in Spanish cities were forced to abandon their cultures, the Cimarrones in their mountain strongholds kept their languages, religious practices, and social customs alive. They formed alliances with indigenous communities, creating new cultural fusions that would influence Mexican society for centuries to come, even if that influence would later be denied. What made Yanga's rebellion particularly significant was its timing and scale.
Yeah.
While there had been smaller uprisings before, the Spanish had documented slave revolts as early as 1537 and 1540. Yanga's group would establish something unprecedented, the first free black settlement in the Americas, an achievement that would inspire similar...
Gaspar Yanga put in so much work against the Spanish that they said, okay, you can have this territory right here and we won't bother you in this particular territory. So that's because the Spanish, they were losing a lot of people, and the Africans that were down there, or the black originals and the Africans, they went to war with the Spanish. They didn't take those beatings laying down. You know, there was a major slave revolt in Mexico. So yes, they fought off the Spanish, and they defeated the Spanish in several battles down there in southern Mexico. Now, if you look at Guerrero, which is named after Vincent Guerrero, the second president of Mexico, nicknamed El Negro, Gaspar Yanga, this is southern Mexico. Now, in southern Mexico, that's where you have all the pyramids. The majority of your black melanated people live in southern Mexico, which is where you could find the pyramids. It's in southern Mexico.
Rebellions throughout Mexico and beyond. The choice of location wasn't random. Like many African leaders...
Shout out to Nada for the super chat. I appreciate you. Yeah, like that's where all the slave rebellions were. If you look at southern Mexico today, that's where you can find all the pyramids, and that's where Mexico's black population resides, right? Southern Mexico got deep black history. That's where the Olmec statues are found at in southern Mexico. That's where the pyramids are found at in southern Mexico. Southern Mexico has deep black history. There's a lot of black history in southern Mexico. Let's go.
Before him, Yanga understood the strategic value of mountainous terrain. The difficult-to-reach areas of Veracruz provided natural protection against Spanish attacks and offered rich soil for agriculture. What made Yanga's settlement unique was its organization. Drawing from their diverse African backgrounds, many of the settlers came from regions with advanced agricultural and military traditions. They created a thriving community that
Blacks, melanin does come from black people. We are the original people. Everybody with melanin in their skin got, DNA that comes from us. So that's where melanin comes from, us. We are the original people on planet Earth. This is a known fact. Why do you think a black person can have a person of any skin complexion? Black people can have the darkest baby to the mid complexion to the lightest. We're the only race of people who can produce children like that. Black people, you can have two Africans that can have an albino. You can't put two white people together to have a black baby, but you can put two black people together to have what? A white looking baby. That is the power in our genetics. No other race could do that. No other race could produce people of all those various skin complexions and skin tones like black people can. We're the only race who can produce that. We are the original people on planet Earth. Where do you think melanin comes from?
combined farming with strategic defense. They cultivated crops they knew from Africa, raised livestock, and established trade networks with sympathetic indigenous communities. But they weren't just farmers. Under Yanga's leadership, they became masters.
The Olmecs are melanated people. I didn't say the Olmecs are FBA people. I said they're black melanated people, because keep in mind, you have different tribes of black people. If you go to Australia, the Aboriginals of Australia, those are black people. Why do you think they have Afro-Indigenous? Why do you think the blacks in Mexico are acknowledged as Afro-Indigenous? Why? Because they did their homework and research, and they figured out that there were blacks in Mexico prior to any European stepping foot on the land. Way before the European settlers came to Mexico, you already had blacks who were there. This is why they're acknowledged as Afro-Indigenous people today. They added that to the Constitution. What are you talking about, Willis? You're speaking to one of the realest in the game. Who? King Supreme. I thought you knew.
Strategists. For nearly 4 decades, they conducted carefully planned raids on Spanish caravans traveling between Veracruz and Mexico City. These weren't random attacks. They specifically targeted shipments of goods and supplies, while also helping other enslaved people escape. Their reputation grew so fearsome that Spanish merchants began avoiding the region entirely, costing the colonial government significant revenue. The Spanish tried repeatedly to crush this resistance. They sent military expeditions into the mountains, but each time, Yanga's people used their knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver them.
See, Gaspar Yanga understood the land and how to navigate the land. This is why he was able to defeat the Spanish in several battles. There was mountains, there were hills. This is where the pyramids are. You know, when you look up Yanga, they named a whole town, a city after Yanga in southern Mexico. Now, Mexicans never talk about it because they never like to acknowledge the black history of Mexico. But here we go. Guerrero was named after Vincent Guerrero. He was the second president of Mexico. His nickname was El Negro. So southern Mexico got a lot of black history. You know?
The community's military prowess wasn't just about fighting. They developed sophisticated early warning systems and evacuation plans that kept their people safe during attacks. By 1609, after years of failed attempts to defeat them, the Spanish colonial authorities were forced to do something unprecedented: negotiate with people they considered property. Yanga, demonstrating remarkable political acumen, demanded not just freedom for his people, but an official charter for their settlement. This charter would make San Lorenzo de los Negros the first legally recognized free black settlement in the Americas.
See, the people in that particular region were free, and the reason that they were free, that because they was defeating the Spanish was losing a lot of soldiers, so they had to compromise. He said, listen, not only do we want our freedom, we want to have our own land. We want our own land and our own territory. This is the land of the free blacks. There was a lot of bloodshed. A whole lot of blood had to be shed in order for them to come to that understanding. So Gaspar Yanga, blood, sweat, and tears, fought for the freedom of black people in Mexico, defeated the Spanish in several battles. So much to the point to where the Spaniards had to compromise on him. They had to come to the table to negotiate a deal. Yanga said, we want our own territory. We don't want no Spanish invaders coming over here. This is our land. You leave us alone, we leave you alone. So Gaspar Yanga was a soldier who went to war to protect his people, went to war to free his people. But that you're not going to hear Mexicans talking about that. They're not going to talk about that. Why? Because Mexico has fought so hard to erase black history, which is why they barely added blacks to the census in 2019. So what does that tell you? They're liars about history. If you hide somebody out of the census for centuries, then you've been lying about history. That's all the proof that you need that they've been lying about history, erasing the black history of Mexico. But what do you expect from Spanish conquistadors? That's what Spanish conquistadors do. They erase history, then they rewrite the history.
The community's military prowess wasn't just about fighting. They developed sophisticated early warning systems and evacuation plans that kept their people safe during attacks. By 1609, after years of failed attempts to defeat them, the Spanish colonial authorities were forced to do something unprecedented: negotiate with people they considered property. Yanga, demonstrating remarkable political acumen, demanded not just freedom for his people, but an official charter for their settlement. This charter would make San Lorenzo de los Negros the first legally recognized free black settlement in the Americas. The negotiations themselves were groundbreaking. Yanga secured guarantees of self-governance, the right to bear arms, and protection from re-enslavement. The settlement would be required to pay tribute to the Spanish crown, but in exchange, they would have autonomy over their internal affairs. This wasn't just a concession, it was a recognition of black political power in colonial Mexico.
Now, this is why Gaspar Yanga is a soldier. Gaspar Yanga is he goes down in history as one of the most brave militant soldiers that fought for equality, that fought for the freedom of his people. Much respect to Gaspar Yanga. Much respect to Vincent Guerrero, also known as El Negro. El Negro Vincent Guerrero was the second president of Mexico. A black man in Mexico abolished slavery. Did you know that a black man by the name of Vincent Guerrero, also known as nickname El Negro, a black man abolished slavery in Mexico? But guess what? He was assassinated after 9 months. 9 months after he abolished slavery, after he became the president, he was assassinated by the pale-skinned Europeans who wanted to dominate and conquer Mexico. Vincent Guerrero was fighting so that melanated people, indigenous people, would have the same rights as the pale-faced people in Mexico. And he was assassinated because he was fighting for the rights of melanated black people. That's why they assassinated our brother El Negro. He was assassinated after 9 months. And listen, he became president, and within 9 months of him becoming president, he abolished slavery and help Mexico to gain their independence from Spain. So in 9 months, look at everything that El Negro accomplished. He did it in 9 months. You mean to tell me a black man becomes president and he abolishes slavery in 9 months? Mexico is liberated from Spain. Mexico had their independence from Spain when a black man got in office, and he did it in 9 months. That's why they assassinated Vincent Guerrero, because he was too powerful. He had too much influence. He was too powerful. That's why they got rid of him. They didn't want black people to be acknowledged in Mexico. That's why they assassinated Guerrero, El Negro.
San Lorenzo de los Negros, later renamed Yanga in 1932, became more than just a town. It was proof that resistance could succeed, that enslaved people could force their oppressors to the negotiating table. The settlement inspired similar communities throughout Mexico. These palenques, or free black settlements, sprang up in remote areas, particularly in the coastal regions where large enslaved populations worked on plantations. These communities weren't just places of refuge, they were centers of African cultural preservation. While enslaved people in the
See, you never hear Mexicans talk about that. You notice you never hear Mexicans say, you know what, a black man abolished slavery in Mexico. They never say that, because a lot of them don't even know that. Some of them know it, but a lot of them don't know that, because They're not taught Black history in their households. They're taught to ignore Black accomplishments in their culture, in their households. A lot of Mexicans don't know that a Black man abolished slavery in Mexico, and he did it in 9 months.
Cities were often forced to abandon their traditions. In the Palenques, they could maintain their languages, religious practices, and social customs. They created unique fusion cultures, blending African traditions with indigenous and Spanish influences, contributing to the rich cultural tapestry of colonial Mexico. But Yanga's legacy went beyond
Garaspa Yanga. Yeah.
just inspiring other escaped slaves. His successful negotiation with colonial authorities created a template for resistance that would be used by other marginalized groups throughout Mexico. His story proved that even within the brutal Spanish colonial system, determined resistance could force change. However, the story of Yanga and Mexico's African heritage would soon be deliberately erased from the nation's memory, because in 1810, something happened that would change everything. 1810.
Check out 1810. Mexico had just won its independence after 3 centuries of Spanish colonial rule. After 3 centuries of Spanish colonial rule.
Mexico had just won its independence after 3 centuries of Spanish colonial rule, but its new leaders faced an impossible problem. Before them stood a nation fractured by a rigid caste system, where your skin color determined everything from the work you could do to the clothes you could wear. The Spanish were gone, but they left behind a society shaped by their obsession with racial hierarchy.
Even when the Spanish left, Mexico continued those ideologies, the anti-Black mentality. Even when the Spanish lost, even when the Spanish conquistadors were, not how could I let me reword that. When Mexico gained its independence from Spain, they still had Spanish conquistador ways, because they were still running Mexico with that same caste system, which means white supremacy still reigned supreme in Mexico, even when the Spaniards were forced to leave. Even when they didn't rule Mexico no more, the mentality was so embedded in Mexico, because guess what? The Spanish conquistadors ruled Mexico for 3 centuries. So if you've been used to living a certain way for centuries, you're going to continue that mindset. You're not going to stop practicing these ideas and the way that things been ran for centuries. You're going to continue with that same mindset, because as humans, we are creatures of habit. So even when the Spanish conquistadors lost control over Mexico, the people still had an anti-Black mindset. Why? Because they were practicing anti-Blackness for over 3 centuries. It's embedded in the culture. It's a part of Mexico's history. What? Anti-Blackness. Bingo. If you've been doing something for 300 years, you're not going to stop doing it all of a sudden, because you're not going to stop doing it overnight. It's going to take a long time, and sometimes it can never be fixed. Some things are not repairable.
In this new nation, African descendants made up more than 10% of the population, far outnumbering the Spanish. You could do to the clothes you could. Mexico's African heritage would soon be deliberately erased from the nation's memory, because in 1810, something happened that would change everything. 1810. Mexico had just won its independence after 3 centuries of Spanish colonial rule, but its new leaders faced an impossible problem. Before them stood a nation fractured by a rigid caste system, where your skin color determined everything from the work you could do to the clothes you could wear. The Spanish were gone, but they left behind a society shaped by their obsession with racial hierarchy. In this new nation, African descendants made up more than 10% of the population, far outnumbering the Spanish colonizers who had crafted this system. How do you unite a country where the color of your skin had, for centuries, determined your entire destiny? Their solution would prove both simple and devastating. They would create a new identity, something they called...
So we got 500 people watching and 300 likes. Get us 500 likes. At least get us 500 likes. Salute to the people that's been supporting. Shout out to Evelyn for the Cash App, and shout out to Tiffany for the Cash App. Blessings to everybody. So far, it's been the ladies. I think I'm gonna start making more content for the ladies, because it seemed like the ladies been supporting me way more than the brothers. Now I got some brothers who are supporters as well. I'm not trying to say anything, but what I've noticed is the ladies the ladies have been supporting my channel consistently. They've been supporting through Cash Apps. They've been supporting through Super Chats. So I think we're gonna start making more content to the ladies to show our love and appreciation for them. The brothers, the brothers have kind of fell off a little bit. I've noticed ever since I created this new channel, you don't see a lot of these brothers over here no more. And I think I know why. I didn't figure it out. But then again, you can't pull something over my head and think I ain't gonna see it. But shout out to the ladies who have became loyal supporters of this platform. I appreciate you all.
Raza Cosmica, the cosmic race. More than
now he's finna get into the Viva la Raza thing. Check this out.
10% of the population, far outnumbering the Spanish colonizers who had crafted this system. How do you unite a country where the color of your skin had, for centuries, determined your entire destiny? Their solution would prove both simple and devastating. They would create a new identity, something they called La Raza Cosmica, the cosmic race. The groundwork for this erasure started immediately after independence. In 1810, Jose Maria Morelos abolished slavery and the caste system, declaring that
it was Jose. Now Vincent Guerrero played a role in abolishing it, right? He did, but you got to think. I want you to check out this guy right here, and I'm gonna do a whole story about this guy right here. Sometimes I get the dates mixed up and a few things, but the 90-something% of what I'm saying is accurate. I might have to go back and fix and tweak maybe like one or two things, but 90+% of the things that I say is accurate. You could do your own research.
Morelos abolished slavery and the caste system, declaring that all citizens would be treated equally and recognized simply as Mexicans. On the surface, it sounded like progress.
It wasn't true. It wasn't true though. Like he did that, but think about it. If that was the case, blacks would have been a part of the census centuries ago. So that sounded good on the surface, but did he do it? Absolutely not.
Caste system, declaring that all citizens would be treated equally and recognized simply as Mexicans. On the surface, it sounded like progress, but this seemingly noble gesture carried a poison pill. By declaring everyone equal, it created a myth of colorblindness that would be used to ignore centuries of racial inequality. But the real architect of Mexico's racial erasure would come later. In the 1920s,
shout out to Nikisha. Nikisha blessed us with a Cash App as well. I appreciate you. Shout out to the ladies.
Philosopher Jose centuries of racial inequality. But the real architect of Mexico's racial erasure would come later. In the 1920s, philosopher Jose Vasconcelos developed his theory of La Raza Cosmica, the cosmic race. His vision was that Mexico would transcend race by mixing everyone together into a new, superior breed of humanity. It sounded progressive, it sounded inclusive, but there was a dark undercurrent to his theory. In Vasconcelos' cosmic race, European features were the ideal. Indigenous traits would be tolerated as part of the mix, but African features, those were meant to disappear entirely. He didn't.
Exactly. That's what he did. That's what he did. So when we talk about the erasure of blackness, well, this is what they're known to practice in Mexico. They have practiced this right here for centuries.
Even try to hide his anti-black racism. He described black people as eager for sensual joy, intoxicated with dances and unbridled lust, who would be absorbed by the superior type and redeemed gradually through voluntary extinction. This wasn't just academic philosophy. It became official government policy. The post-revolutionary Mexican state embraced what they called...
So when I tell you anti-blackness is a part of their culture, I'm giving you the facts. I'm not just saying it because I feel like saying it. It's true. Anti-blackness is a part of their culture in Mexico. It really is.
Meant to disappear entirely. He didn't even try to hide his anti-black racism. He described black people as eager for sensual joy, intoxicated with dances and unbridled lust, who would be absorbed by the superior type and redeemed gradually through voluntary extinction. This wasn't just academic philosophy. It became official government policy. The post-revolutionary Mexican state embraced what they called mestizaje, the idea that Mexico was a nation of mixed-race people.
Most Mexicans and Latinos will never admit the anti-blackness that comes from their culture. But when you study the history, you're going to know it to be true for yourself. So when you understand the history, they can never gaslight you by saying, no, no, that's not true. No, 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 that's not true. No, it is true. Stop it. You're not going to gaslight people who got knowledge, people who study history. You can't do it.
But this mixing wasn't meant to celebrate diversity. Instead, it was a deliberate strategy to whiten the population. They even had a term for it, mejorando la raza, improving the race by marrying someone lighter skinned. The impact.
Improving the race by marrying somebody white, not just lighter skin. Mija la raza, da 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 da. Why you think Mexicans say mayate and all that? Because they were taught that black was bad and white is good. They've been trained and taught to whiten up the race. It's a part of their culture. Most of them will never admit it, but when you understand the history, you know this to be a fact. The irrefutable facts.
Was systematic and far-reaching. In schools, history textbooks were rewritten to minimize or completely omit the African presence in Mexican history, the contributions of Black Mexicans to the independence struggle, including heroes like Jose Maria Morelos and General Vicente Guerrero, who were of African descent, were quietly stripped.
See, even the dude Jose, he was a black man too. He was an Afro-Mexican. You know, Vicente and Jose, they were of African descent. But the people who ruled Mexico overthrew what they wanted, because the majority of people who were running Mexico, the majority of people in power still had a conquistador Spanish mindset. And if you got a Spanish conquistador mindset, you want to see blacks at the bottom of society.
Minimize or completely omit the African presence in Mexican history, the contributions of Black Mexicans to the independence struggle, including heroes like Jose Maria Morelos and General Vicente Guerrero, who were of African descent, were quietly stripped of their racial identity. The erasure went beyond just education. Government censuses stopped counting the Black population entirely.
The government stopped counting the Black population entirely to erase Black history in Mexico. I want y'all to hear this again. Come on, man. I don't be making things up. I be giving you guys the irrefutable facts. We're speaking on historical facts. Mexico went out of their way to erase Black history, to the contribution of blacks in Mexico. This is why they kept Black people out of the census for centuries and barely added Black people to the census in 2019. If that ain't anti-Blackness, I don't know what is. If that doesn't prove how Mexico tried to erase Black history, then nothing will. These are the irrefutable facts.
Books were rewritten to minimize or completely omit the African presence in Mexican history, the contributions of Black Mexicans to the independence struggle, including heroes like Jose Maria Morelos and General Vicente Guerrero, who were of African descent, were quietly stripped of their racial identity. The erasure went beyond just education. Government censuses stopped counting the Black population entirely. The last official count of Africans in Mexico had been in 1810. After that, nothing. Black Mexicans were often forced to identify as indigenous in censuses, even though their ethnic and cultural roots were markedly different. The effects rippled through every aspect of society. Black communities that had existed for centuries found themselves increasingly isolated, particularly in regions like Costa Chica and Veracruz.
Right, because they still to this day, that's where the blacks are. They're in southern Mexico. And that region of Mexico, these people were deprived of resources, deprived of equality. They live way below the poverty line. I mean, think about it. You exist in a region of the country where they refuse to acknowledge your existence, so much to the point to where they kept you out of the census. So if that doesn't prove anti-Blackness, then you're just working with a peanut for a brain.
Official recognition. They were cut off from government resources and development programs.
Check it. I'm gonna let you hear it. I explained it to you.
Mexico had been in 1810. After that, who were of African descent, were quietly stripped of their racial identity. The erasure went beyond just education. Government censuses stopped counting the Black population entirely. The last official count of Africans in Mexico had been in 1810. After that, Nothing. Black Mexicans were often forced to identify as indigenous in censuses, even though their ethnic and cultural roots were markedly different. The effects rippled through every aspect of society. Black communities that had existed for centuries found themselves increasingly isolated, particularly in regions like Costa Chica and Veracruz. Without official recognition, they were cut off from government resources and development programs. Many areas where Afro-Mexicans lived lacked.
I've been teaching this Afro-Mexican history for a long time. So the people who watch me, they're not uneducated. Now, the wannabe Spanish conquistadors, they come in here like, no, that's not true. Those are the uneducated people. I've been teaching Black history and the existence of Afro-Mexicans. I've been talking about this on my channel for years.
Basic infrastructure, roads different. The effects rippled through every aspect of society. Black communities that had existed for centuries found themselves increasingly isolated, particularly in regions like Costa Chica.
Gilbert, a Spanish conquistador, talking about an education. They don't teach this knowledge in college. Get your goofy ass up out of here, boy. This is knowledge that you can't get in college. They don't teach Afro-Mexican history in college because that's indoctrination. That's not even real education. They don't teach people this stuff in school. Listen, homie, Europeans will never teach you the true history. You got to study and do your own research. I repeat, Europeans will never give you the facts about real history. They'll give you their distorted version of the story, but they'll never teach you real history. And you should never depend on a European to educate you about history. Because why? It is a known fact that Europeans are known for erasing history, then rewriting the history. So why would you depend on somebody who erases history to educate you about history? It makes no sense. Why would somebody who's trying to erase history teach you the facts about history? It doesn't make sense. So in other words, you should never depend on a European to educate you.
And Veracruz, without official recognition, they were cut off from government resources and development programs. Many areas where Afro-Mexicans lived lacked basic infrastructure, roads, schools, healthcare facilities. This erasure was so complete that by the late 20th century, many Mexicans genuinely believed there were no Black people in their country. Some Afro-Mexicans didn't even know their own history. They thought they were, in their words, weird indigenous people because of their hair texture and skin color. The systematic denial ran so deep that Mexican immigration officials would sometimes detain and deport their own Black citizens.
Mexico was deporting their own Black citizens, sending them to Haiti. I think I'm gonna do a whole live stream on that. I think I'm gonna do a whole nother live stream about that tomorrow morning, how Mexico was deporting their Black citizens to Haiti. And Haiti turned around and said, hold on, man, these people speak Spanish. These ain't our people. Take these people back to Mexico. What the hell y'all doing? Shout out to Donald for blessing us with a Cash App. I appreciate you, Donald, for the Cash App, my brother.
Because they couldn't believe that Black people could be Mexican. There are documented cases of Afro-Mexicans, weird indigenous people, because of schools, healthcare facilities. This erasure was so complete that by the late 20th century, many Mexicans genuinely believed there were no Black people in their country. Some Afro-Mexicans didn't even know their.
This is how dumb a lot of these wannabe Spanish conquistadors are. Do you know that Blacks in Mexico are now recognized as Afro-Indigenous? Why do they call them Afro-Indigenous? Because they realize that Mexico had a Black population prior to any Europeans stepping foot on the land. There were Blacks in Mexico prior to any European stepping foot on the land, which is why the Blacks in Mexico today are acknowledged in the Constitution as Afro-Indigenous. Yes.
Own history. They thought they were, in their words, weird indigenous people because of their hair texture and skin color. The systematic denial ran so deep that Mexican immigration officials would sometimes detain and deport their own Black citizens, simply because they couldn't believe that Black people could be Mexican. There are documented cases of Afro-Mexicans being deported to Haiti or Honduras purely based on their appearance, a cruel irony in a country that claims not to see race. It wasn't until 2015 that Mexico finally allowed people to identify as Afro-Mexican in a national survey, the first official recognition of their existence in over 2 centuries. The results were revealing. Approximately 1.4 million Mexicans identified as having African ancestry. Even then, activists believed
a lot of people didn't want to admit that they were Black because the Blacks in Mexico were treated so bad. This is why, and not just Mexico, all over Latin America. This is why you have people say, no, 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 me no black. Because blacks are treated so poorly, blacks are treated so bad all across Latin America, so much to the point to where people who are clearly black will deny the fact that they are black. This is why you got people who are dark as Wesley Snipes saying, no, 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 papi, me no black, me no black. Because they felt like if they admitted that they were black, but in reality, you don't need to admit it. We can look at you and tell that you are. But some of these people were in denial so much to the point to where they say, no, 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 we're no black, because they felt like they would have more opportunities if they denied their blackness. That's why you have black people with that mindset all over Latin America. No, 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 papi, me no black. Because being black meant that you're at the bottom of the totem pole. Being black meant that you're at the bottom of society in Latin American countries. That is why so many of them deny their blackness. It is a sickness, but it's the truth.
This number is far lower in Honduras, purely based on their appearance, a cruel irony in a country that claims not to see race. It wasn't until 2015 that Mexico finally allowed people to identify as Afro-Mexican in a national survey, the first official recognition of their existence in over 2 centuries. The results were revealing. Approximately 1.4 million Mexicans identified as having African ancestry. Even then, activists believe this number is far lower than reality, as many black Mexicans, conditioned by centuries of erasure, still hesitate to identify themselves as such. The constitutional recognition in 2019 marked another milestone, but it came after decades of grassroots organizing by black Mexican activists. Organizations like Mexico Negro had been fighting since—
No, 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 papi, me no black. And I just told you why they would say that. They knew that blacks were treated poorly and unfair. So they went out of their way to deny their blackness for those reasons. Being black in Latin America meant that you're at the bottom of society, which is why so many people in Latin America deny their blackness in the first place. But common sense should tell you, hey, man, it don't matter if you say you're not black. We can look at you and see your black African roots. We can look at you and see it. I don't care how much you try to deny it. That's crazy.
1997 for official recognition of Afro-Mexican identity. Their first annual meeting of black towns marked the beginning of an organized movement that would take more than 20 years to achieve its first major victory. But recognition alone discrimination, but against centuries of systematic erasure. They're demanding not just to be counted, but to be seen, not just to be acknowledged, but to be valued. They're pushing for representation in media, politics, and education, fighting against a system that for 2 centuries has pretended they don't exist. The question now isn't whether racism exists. The data makes that undeniable. The question is whether
that's why, man, people in Latin America deny their blackness. It boils down to economics and opportunity. Texas Chicano, some of y'all only want to cry, complain, and steal. You guys are still in our culture. You guys are making music that come from our culture. We don't make music that comes from Spanish or Latino culture. We got hip hop, rap, R&B, jazz, the blues, funk music. All of that music comes from black culture. Name one music genre that Chicanos created that everybody listens to, that everybody's influenced by. Name one music genre in America that was created by Chicanos. He said YouTube is messing with your sound. I don't know, man. They've been playing a lot of games, but it is what it is. You can't stop the rain. Texas Chicano. The Zootsuits, the Mexican Pachucos, they got that from the black jazz musicians. That's where the Pachuco culture comes from. The black jazz musicians who would perform in Los Angeles in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. To all you Mexicans in the comments, and I'm not saying this to be disrespectful, we're having an honest debate where we're sharing intellectual properties. We're sharing knowledge and wisdom. We're sharing history. Check this out, family. Name one music genre that Mexicans created, Chicanos created. Name one. I can name several music genres that was created by foundational Black Americans. Now, name me one music genre that Chicanos created that everybody listens to, that non-Spanish people listen to. Name one music genre created by Chicanos that non-Spanish speaking people listen to, that influences the whole world. Name one music genre created by Chicanos. That's all I'm saying.
Mexico is finally ready to confront its anti-Black.
All right, let's go to the next clip. Lowrider culture, man. Nobody cares about no lowriders, man. Nobody cares about lowriders, bro. They just don't. Nobody cares about a lowrider, man. That is played out, man. The only people who care about lowriders are people who are maybe like 45 and up. You know what I mean? And a white man was the first person to put hydraulics in a vehicle, not a Mexican. Let's just be honest about this.
Peoples tape making racist comments. Now, Council President Nuri Martinez has now resigned, and among the several
if most people don't care about lowriders, man, it's like Mexicans try to hold on to, and then that's cool. You guys can latch on to that, but we don't. Nobody really cares about lowrider culture like that. You got a few blacks who might deal with it, but even if you study the history of lowriders, Mexicans were not the first person to put hydraulics in a lowrider, in a vehicle. They were not. They just was not.
Black comments, Martinez said this about her colleague, council member Mike Bonen's 2-year-old black son. Take a listen.
It's like the oddest thing. It's like black and brown on this float, and then there's this white guy with this little black kid who's misbehaved. Este niño has they're not even, they're not doing. The kid is bouncing off the effing walls on the float, practically tipping it over. There's nothing you can do to control him. Parece changuito. They're raising him like a little white kid, which I was like, this kid needs a beat down. Like, let me take him around the corner and then I'll bring him back.
All those caught on tape have apologized, but anti-Black sentiment is much bigger than just this latest news, and that's what we really want to talk about today. Joining me now is Carmen Perez-Jordan. She's CEO of the Gathering for Justice and a Chicana feminist. Tanya K. Hernandez, she's a law professor at Fordham University and author of Racial Innocence, Unmasking Latino Anti-Black Bias and the Struggle.
So this is right here. They're talking about anti-Blackness that comes from Latin America. Yet again, make sure that you guys bless the like button.
For equality, and of course, Arturo Vargas. He's the CEO of NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials Educational Funds. Happy to have you with me. Carmen, I want to start with you because I think the most disappointing thing about all of this was, look, we've all known that anti-Blackness is prevalent in many parts of the Latino community.
Cesar Chavez lost to Mayweather, man. Mayweather, they lost. Black people, we got fighters who are champions in every weight class. You guys probably had like one heavyweight champion. Let's be real. I'm speaking to the man. You guys probably had one heavyweight champion, and he lost the title after one fight. Black people, we got fighters, we got champions in every weight division. You guys only have smaller fighters. So what does that tell you? You guys cannot compare with the black fighters because we have heavyweights. You guys don't have heavyweights. Look at all of the black heavyweights throughout boxing history. You only got one Mexican heavyweight, and he was a fluke. He won the championship out of luck, and then right after that, he lost the belt. Black people, we have champions in every weight division. Once you get to the bigger weight divisions in boxing, you don't see Mexicans. You don't. Mexicans only exist in the smaller weight classes for the most part. You might have an exception here and there, but you guys only had one heavyweight champion. You can go back to the beginning of history in boxing. You're going to see several black heavyweight champions. I think I rest my case.
community. And just to inform our viewers, it's followed most American Latinos from their home countries. This is the result of Spanish colonizing, enslaving, and raping of indigenous and African peoples. But now that we're here, how do we change this? Because so many people were impacted by this sentiment. And I feel like it kind of set, coalition and working together back significantly. What's your take?
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for having me, and especially hosting this long overdue conversation. It has taken us a step back. Many of us have committed our lives to doing Black and Brown solidarity, Black and Brown liberation work, and it's going to take having courageous conversations. It's going to take acknowledging the whitewashing, the spreading of white supremacy, of the whitewashing of our history and our communities within the Latino community and the anti-Blackness. Some of the things that, I recognize, especially when we're doing Black and Brown solidarity work, is that we have to, use Kenyan nonviolence as a form of reconciliation. It's personal commitment. It's also gathering information and having courageous conversations. But there are many people who've been doing this work for quite some time. And as I've spoken to my colleagues who are in this field, it's a major step back and it's a major disappointment. But we need to stop these conversations from when they begin. And that starts in our homes.
Yeah, I agree. And, Tanya, I want to bring you in the conversation because, I see these things. I've heard and been in proximity to these things my entire life. I've always grown up in communities where the Latino community was very adjacent and, a lot of shared experiences. And it does tend to, the common ground here is white supremacy, because it seems like some people in the Latino community feel like if we're white adjacent, maybe we will not be subjected to the same racism and prejudice.
Tiffany Cross is a good-looking woman, but damn, her mindset is cooked. But she is a beautiful Black woman. I will say that about Tiffany Cross. Her mindset is just like, oh my God. She's a diehard liberal Democrat. But she is an attractive Black woman for sure.
To show a clip from a great writer in The Atlantic who says, your whiteness will always be relative. She's directing this in the Latino community. You can utter as much garbage as you want about Black people. You can vote Republican. You can lead the Proud Boys. You will never achieve whiteness. The gift bestowed upon Italians and the Irish isn't happening for us. So you can discriminate against Black people and Afro-Latinos all you want. It won't make you white. It just makes you a racist person of color, a brown Clayton Bigsby, a fool. I echo those sentiments. Curious your thoughts this morning.
Well,
you have Latinos speaking out against anti-Blackness in their homelands, in their own communities. They've been doing it.
Actually think that there is another layer to this. Some people within the Latino community do achieve whiteness. One, because they are white appearing.
Some people in the Latino community do achieve whiteness. You have a lot of Latinos who fought to be legally white. Mexicans in particular fought to be legally white in the 1930s. The LULAC organization, the president of the LULAC organization, I think it was it Alex Terajina or was it John J. Herrera? He said Mexicans belong to the Caucasian race and therefore are white. I could show you the video. I could show you the quotes made by their civil rights leaders from the LULAC organization. Mexicans at one particular time, mainly in the 1930s, they fought to be legally whites. Because why? Having proximity to whiteness meant what? Better opportunities, equality. So instead of fighting for the civil rights of people of color, they said, we'll get more benefits if we just become legally whites. I'm giving you the irrefutable facts. I'm giving you the historical facts.
Favor more our European people within the Latino community do achieve whiteness. One, because they are white appearing. Another layer to this. Some people within the Latino community do achieve whiteness. One, because they are white appearing. They favor more our European ancestors. And depending on their accent, their educational level, whether they actually have a recognizable Hispanic surname, that all those things enable a person to, I wouldn't call it passing, but seemingly just and seamlessly being able to pass into whiteness, white Anglo whiteness, just as they have whiteness within Latin America and the Caribbean. So I guess what I would want to say is that despite this idea of all Latinos being brown, some browns are browner than others, and some whites are whiter than others. There are Latinos who are white, whether they have that personal identity or not. That's their socially ascribed race from others outside, and they get to move in that privilege as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Thank you for making it. Arturo, I think something that's kind of been lost in this conversation.
John J. Herrera, Felix Tirajina. These were some of your LULAC leaders. League of Latin American Citizens, LULAC. League of United Latino American Citizens. That's what LULAC stands for. They represented the Latino people here in America, and they fought to be legally white. See, Mexicans felt like, okay, we'll never get equal opportunities being Mexican. So if we fight to be legally white, maybe they'll stop trying. Maybe they won't treat us like black people. See, Mexicans felt like if we become legally white, we ain't got to worry about being treated like black people. So they fought for white proximity. They fought for white acceptance. That's what the LULAC organization did for Latinos.
Because we focus so much on the language, but what they were actually discussing in that meeting was redistricting. And this is where I think we have to start having these tough conversations now, because by the year 2044, there will be no racial majority. And so I've worked in spaces where the communities start fighting over resources. If the Latino community is getting this, that means that black people are getting less of this. If the AAPI community is getting this, that means
shout out to my girl Erica for blessing us with that beautiful Cash App. I told you the ladies been coming through, man, showing a lot of love to the platform. So in return, I'm going to show a lot of love to you all. Let's get back to the content though.
Indigenous folks are getting left out. And I just wonder how we can shift this conversation, because these racist views impact politics and policy in Los Angeles and impact people. So I wonder how we can get ahead of this as we become the rising majority of this country, and not have these kind of in-wars and not adopt the behavior of those who would oppress us, but kind of rethink how we envision and work in democracy. So your thoughts as the leader of NALEO on that?
Well, first of all, good morning from Los Angeles. I'm here in the middle of the storm, and thank you for having me again on your show. There are 2 points I want to make here. The first one is, please do not define the relationships between our communities by the actions of some elected officials. We at NALEO immediately call for the resignation of the 3 council members because of these racist statements. We had to hold them accountable. That's my first point. My second point, I have been involved on redistricting work since the 1991 redistricting. This was my 4th cycle in 2020.
LA City Council president resigns over racist remarks. You remember Nuri Martinez, Kevin DeLeon, and a list of others got caught saying a lot of racist things towards blacks. And this is your LA City Council. These are not no ignorant gang members or guys that's in prison. No, these are politicians, so-called leaders of Los Angeles. Your LA City Council members, which are Mexican Latino, got caught saying a lot of racist things about black people. So when they try to say, oh, that's only racism between the black and brown community, it's only in prison, it's only with gangs. No, this anti-black mindset stems from Mexico. It's embedded in Mexican culture. It's embedded in Latino culture, which is why you have Mexican politicians on the LA City Council getting caught saying racist things about black people. So it don't matter if they're gang members or politicians, they all have this anti-black mindset.
2022. And throughout that entire process, I have worked in coalition with African American leadership, API leadership, Jewish American leadership, to determine how, as community leaders, we can come together to design a map, district, power sharing in a way where everybody has a seat at the table. That is not always the goal of incumbents and elected officials.
Right.
That's why we always draw a very bright line between what incumbents want and what the community wants.
Yeah, I think you make such a really good point there, Arturo. In another life, I worked with Naleo very closely, so I'm familiar with the work that you do. Carmen, we're running out of time, but I think, some of the work that you've done, and we saw, some of this around the Women's March, as these demographics in the country change, it is disheartening to see how this set back. And I think Arturo makes such a good point. Let's not make this the actions of these individuals, even though in many ways this is a microcosm for a lot of conversations that happen around anti-Black sentiment. But I'm just curious, like, how we move past this. How can we repair
rogue supremacy? So keep in mind, you got a guy by the name of Rogue Supremacy that's using one of my pictures as and that's not me. So anytime you see Rogue Supremacy, this is a guy who is using my profile pic. He's using my picture as a profile on social media. So anytime you see Rogue Supremacy, just know that you're dealing with a troll. Just know that.
this damage? Because I've heard from so many Black people who are like, this is the Black-Brown coalition that you're always talking about, and look, this is how they feel about us. And I've worked with so many people who don't feel that way.
All right, enough of that. A lot of them do feel that way. We can't expect for somebody like Tiffany Cross to hold their feet to the fire, because we've had Mexican gangbangers. Check this out right here. This is a Mexican gangbanger, right?
Like, while you were inside, like,
now watch this Mexican gangbanger right here. Use the word mayata just so freely. So you got Mexican politicians in the LA City Council caught using racial slurs towards Black, and this is a gangbanger right here, an OG gangbanger. Well, maybe he's a retired gang member by now, but he still has the raza gangbanger mentality. And I want you to hear what he said about Blacks.
Were there some type, if you could speak on it, if not, I respect it. Were there some type of like intense altercations that you
oh,
had,
absolutely. We went at it. We had a riot with the Mayates,
oh,
the Blacks. Excuse me, I didn't mean to be derogatory that way.
Like intense altercations that you
oh,
had,
absolutely. We went at it. We had a riot with the Mayates,
oh,
the Blacks. Excuse me, I didn't mean to be derogatory.
He was talking about a race riot in prison in California, a race riot in a California prison that they had with the Black. Oh, we went to war with the Mayatas. Excuse me, I mean the Blacks. See, the word mayata flows off, it rolls off of their tongue so freely because this is how they speak amongst each other when they get around their people. Want y'all to hear that again. Now, old boy on the right asked him, why don't you give me a prison story? Tell me about some things that happened in prison. Oh, we went to war with the Mayatas. Oh, excuse me, I mean the Blacks.
We're inside, like, were there some type, if you could,
Jose, Stockton. Yeah, half of my team is in Northern California. Some of the agents in there were norteños at one point, but we don't give a fuck about that.
Yeah,
I don't live that life anymore.
Yeah,
so
no, of course, I get it, of course.
They don't care. You know, we don't. We laugh sometimes. You know?
And with that being said, like, while you were inside, like, were there some type, if you could speak on it, if not, I respect it. Were there some type of like intense altercations that you
oh,
had,
absolutely. We went at it. We had a riot with the Mayates, the Blacks. Excuse me, I didn't mean to be derogatory that way, but with the Black, you know, just, the hood came back into me. But we went at it with the Blacks.
He said, excuse me, the hood came back into me, basically saying hood Mexicans had this mentality. I didn't mean to say mayata, I mean the Blacks. So you had to
oh, absolutely. We went at it. We had a riot with the Mayates, the Blacks. Excuse me, I didn't mean to be derogatory that way, but with the Black, you know, just, the hood came back into me. But we went at it with the Blacks. Yeah, we had a little bit of an issue with the Blacks.
I told you, man, that's how they talk, bro. That's how they talk. That's just how they talk, man.
But these, some places in South America, you had the British, things like that. But there was a lot of African slaves that was brought all the way, down from Mexico all through. Black people were spread everywhere. Now, this sister here, of course, this is her opinion. Last time we spoke about the other, Mexican brother, actually, he talked about, the racism that, or, hey, stay away from Black people in the homes. And some people, especially on Facebook, got any feelings about what he said, because he said it. It didn't come from my mouth. But my questions was at the time, well, like, what we do? Like, and that was a question. Of course, some of you who knew, who came to our Facebook page, that you got, I knew exactly when you stopped listening to the video. I've been doing this for too long to know.
Here goes an Afro-Latina says Mexicans are upset with her for exposing the anti-Blackness. Shout out to Phil. Shout out to Phil for this. But He's talking about the Afro-Latina said that Mexicans are mad at her for exposing the anti-blackness that goes on in their culture, in their country. Check it out.
When you stop listening, because you didn't hear nothing I said at all. You just got to the point. You didn't like what he said. You didn't like my line of questioning. And that was the end of it for you, right?
Matter of fact, before we get into this one, I'm going to show you another OG Mexican using the mayata word, right? And this, he just said it. Check.
Yeah. Another thing, and I got behind you when you went and talked to the Mayates because they had the impression.
Look, here go another OG Mexican, man. And then you had the other dude who called us African booty scratchers on the podcast. So this is a part of their anti-blackness, is a part of their culture, brothers.
Going from that point to this point, I want you to listen to this clip. Confused, and eventually people start clipping that thing and put it out there, stuff like that. But going from that point to this point, I want you to listen to this clip.
Your ignorance out on social media. Another thing, I went out and I got behind you when you went and talked to the Mayates because they had the impression that you were representing somebody. And you don't have Mayates, and I got behind you when you went and talked to the Mayates because they had the impression that you were representing somebody.
And you see how Mayata just flows off of their tongue? He's talking about another Mexican guy that he was cool with, and he said, man, I had your back when you were dealing with the Mayatas, but damn, fool, you disrespected me. I had your back when you were dealing with the Mayatas.
Another thing, your ignorance out on social media. Another thing, I went out and I got behind you when you went and talked to the Mayates because they had the impression that you were representing somebody. And you don't represent nobody, homie, but yourself. You know, and you should.
So I'm just showing you how that word flows so freely off of their mouth, man, off of their tongue. It rolls off of their tongue so freely. Because why? This is how they talk. Now let's get back to this.
Right.
Let's get back to this Afro-Latina saying that Mexicans in Mexico was mad at her for exposing the anti-blackness that goes on over there.
So if you are new, coming and asking questions, at least of me, make sure you do it as an adult, no name calling, etc. Because if you do, you get yourself blocked and banned. That's the way I work. Now, let's listen to this sister about her experiences being a Afro-Latina in Mexico. Let's roll that.
Let's get into it. I think this is a conversation we should be having more often. I start discussing race in Mexico, and everybody wants to come for me because this is what they're saying. Race is not to be addressed in Latin American countries. Addressing of race is only a USA thing. No, it's not a US thing, because guess what? Racism is not just a US thing. Oppression is not just a US thing. Colorism and classism is not just a US thing. And yes, in our country, in Mexico, we experience lots of classism and colorism. And guess what comes hand in hand with that? Racism. And guys, there's a huge resistance to the shit I'm bringing up here, which is crazy to me how people don't realize that it's low-key racist what they're telling me. To not bring up blackness in Mexico. What the hell? Most Mexicans are racist and they don't even fucking know it. If you've never experienced racist energy with crazy to me how people don't realize that it's low-key racist what they're telling me. To not bring up blackness in Mexico. What the hell? Most Mexicans are racist and they don't even fucking know it. If you've never experienced racist energy with Mexicans, it's because you're good. You're privileged. And you don't get to say it doesn't exist because you haven't experienced it. If you haven't experienced racist energy amongst your own people, consider yourself lucky. I have light skin privilege amongst my own people, but because of that, I've been able to pick up on some crazy racist shit white Mexicans be saying right in front of me without truly knowing my background. This whole mejorando la raza shit is one of them. Basically what this means is let's better the race. We need to better the race rather than ruin it. Mexicans be saying this shit for real, out in the open. If you're white and you bring in home a moreno or a dark-skinned person, there's gonna be a conversation that your family's gonna have with you. There's gonna be resistance to that. It's real. This is real life. I've personally dealt with this in relationships with other Mexicans, literally. Telling me shit like, oh, we need to fix your hair, my curly hair. Oh, estás morena. Like, not in a good way, because being morena, I'm fucking proud of it. But the way these people say it, just like in the US, in Mexican households, here and in Mexico, wherever, a black person walks in the room, the energy is about to shift. This is all based off personal experience, yo. My father is a black man. I've literally heard Mexicans talking shit about him beside me because they thought he didn't speak Spanish. Check your people.
That is her experience, but we want to build on her experience. Now, she talked about her dad is black. Her mom is a dark-skinned, indigenous-looking woman. I actually saw that on her TikTok page.
So here's a picture of my parents. So as you can see, my father is a dark-skinned black man.
So she's an Afro-Latina. She said her dad is a black Mexican. Shout out to this beautiful Latina, Afro-Latina woman. Much love to all the beautiful Afro-Latinas.
I actually saw that on her TikTok page.
So here's a picture of my parents. So as you can see, my father is a dark-skinned black man from Mexico. My mother's family is from Yucatan, Quintana Roo, so it's more like that indigenous side. Most people from Quintana Roo or in that area are Mayan. My father's family is from Oaxaca. That's located in the south of Mexico and the coast. So a lot of us, we talk about Afro-Mexicans, being Afro-Mexican. That's how we identify. But when I came here to the US, this was just such a rare thing. Even today, people are like, what? Because people have this idea of Mexicans that, being Mexican is a race. And that, we wear sombreros and eat burritos. So I don't look like a typical Mexican. We don't look like typical Mexicans. So people don't believe that we're Mexican, I guess.
You have to think about the Afro, Latinos or Afro-Mexicans. They've been in the country for 500 years, literally. And just a few years ago, they was just recognized on the census. All this time they've been there, and they've been staying, of course, in their areas like I think they said Veracruz, is it Osaka? Y'all know those names. I'm saying it wrong.
Veracruz, Guerrero, Yanga, Southern Mexico, Veracruz, Guerrero, Yanga. Pacific regions in Southern Mexico is where you will find the Afro-Indigenous people, because keep in mind, Mexico barely added black people to the census in 2019, even though they've been there for centuries. And guess what? The black people in Mexico are acknowledged as what? As Afro-Indigenous. Why do they call these people Afro-Indigenous? Because they realized through studies and research that blacks been in Mexico prior to any European Spanish conquistador stepping foot on the land. I'm giving you the irrefutable facts, the historical facts. You dig.
This time they've been there, and they've been staying, of course, in their areas like I think they said Veracruz, is it Osaka? Y'all know those names. I'm saying it wrong. They've been there like forever, right? Now you got to think about it. There are pivotal figures in Mexican history that help get the Spanish off of Mexico's back. You got to think about one brother who was, half indigenous, half African, Jose Maria Morelos. Now he got in. Became a military leader. He helped, fight against the Spanish. Beat they behind about 22 different times in battle. And he,
just like Gaspar Yanga defeated the Spanish in several battles in southern Mexico. This guy Jose was an Afro-Mexican. Vincent Guerrero, the second president of Mexico, also known as El Negro, played a major role in Mexico gaining their independence from Spain. He played a role in abolishing slavery in Mexico. Afro-Mexicans are the ones who abolished slavery in Mexico.
He is one of the heroes, in Mexico. He was eventually captured, and then he was, killed. Then you got to think about Vicente Guerrero, one of the presidents, the second president of Mexico. He was the brother that ended slavery in Mexico in 1810. He was also a military leader as well. Even when they talk about Cinco de Mayo and all of that, there was a lot of black folks that fought and helped get the Spanish off of
blacks in Mexico played a major role in Mexico gaining their independence from Spain. I repeat for you people who were too slow. Blacks in Mexico played a major role in Mexico gaining their independence from Spain. Vincent Guerrero, also known as El Negro, the second president of Mexico, played a major role in abolishing slavery. Gaspar Yanga and his soldiers fought against the Spanish army, defeated them in several battles, played a major role in Mexico gaining their independence from Spain. I'm giving you the irrefutable facts. I am giving you the historical facts. You can do your own research, and if you're being honest, you're going to come up with the same answers.
Mexico's back. Now, when Vicente Guerrero had ended slavery in 1810, it was a free, country. This is why you had some of my ancestors.
Shout out to Lions Dollars. I want to give a big shout out to my man Lions Dollars for blessing us with a cash app. He said, great stream, bro. I appreciate you, Lions Dollars, for the love and support. Shout out to my girl Bernice. Bernice pulled up and said, here's a gift. I appreciate you, Bernice, for supporting the cash app as well.
Who left America, that escaped slavery from Texas, and then they would go into Mexico because it was a free country. And then when the slave masters tried to go and retrieve these black people, the Mexican army would run they behind right back out of there to go behind back to Texas with that. A lot of black folks joined the Mexican army. A lot of people, you talk about brothers like Gaspar Yanga. It's many people that made pivotal, marks in Mexican history. Black people is solidified in Latin America. They are just as Latino as anyone else. Whether that person's white or they say mestizo looking, etc. They are just as Latino, they're just as Mexican, they're just as Colombian, but they don't want to talk about the anti-black racism in Latin America. You think about all these black people, one of the most populous countries like Brazil, it has more black people in that country actually than America has black people.
Right. Brazil has more black people than we do in the United States of America. Why? Because only 5% of the African slaves were brought to the United States of America. The overwhelming majority of the African slaves during the transatlantic slave trade, the overwhelming majority of African slaves were taken to Latin America, Brazil, Cuba, Colombia, Mexico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Panama, Venezuela, Costa Rica. The overwhelming majority of African slaves during the transatlantic slave trade were taken to Latin America. Only 5% of the African slaves were brought to the United States of America. I'm giving you the irrefutable facts.
And yet they've never had a black president, and they're treated horribly in America. You think about all these black people, one of the most populous countries like Brazil, it has more black people in that country actually than America has.
And I stand corrected. I'll take it down a notch. Only 3% of the African slaves during the transatlantic slave trade were brought to the United States of America. We only took in 3% of the slaves, which further proves my thoughts and what I was saying about there were already black indigenous people in the Americas prior to the Europeans showing up on slave ships who brought Africans from Africa to the United States of America. Huh? Only 3% of the slaves were brought to the United States of America. The overwhelming majority were taken to Latin America, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina. That's where the overwhelming majority of the African slaves were taken to. Only 3 to 5% of the African slaves were brought to the United States of America. I am giving you the irrefutable facts. I am giving you the historical facts. Now deal with that.
And yet they've never had a black president. And they're treated horribly in Brazil, horribly. And even Minister Farrakhan talked about how you have a lot of black people in Latin America, yet white folks are running it. No black people at all. Colombia has just elected their first vice president-elect, Francia Marquez. Just elected her. And they made history. After all these years that Colombia has been in existence, this is the first time ever that you have a black person get up to the vice presidency. Now, we're not talking about America, but the thing is, when you have people that's running around, as this sister was saying, don't talk about race. Don't talk about racism. That's not what we talk about. Oh, why you bringing it up? That's no different than the white supremacists in America talking about critical race theory. Don't talk about the history of America. The history of America is dark. The history of America is very, very...
They don't want to talk about the history because if you talk about the history, it exposes the anti-blackness of that country. It exposes the anti-blackness of that country. This is why they don't want you to talk about the history, because talking about the history exposes the anti-blackness that's been embedded in these countries, that's been embedded all over Latin America and America in general. So they don't want you talking about it because they don't want you exposing it.
Evil. Slavery did happen here in America. It did. And this country was built on slavery. The infrastructure of America was built on slavery. They got their wealth through slavery. And black Americans helped innovate this country, period. In any room you're sitting in, I can point to something right now that a black American helped innovate. All the lights I got on in here, you wouldn't have no lights. It wouldn't have been for the brother Lewis Latimer, who created the carbon filament of the light bulb. Without the carbon filament, the light bulb would have...
Shout out to the brother right there. Shout out to the brother.
Black American.
You got Mexicans who don't know that a black man created the traffic light. And guess what? The traffic light is used all across the world, not just here in America. A black man created the traffic light that controls the flow of traffic. You got people today who don't even know that a black man created the traffic light. You pull up to a traffic light every day, and you got a lot of Mexicans and non-black people who don't even know that a black man created that. The traffic light is used all across the world.
Help innovate. The infrastructure of America was built on slavery. They got their wealth through slavery, and black Americans helped innovate this country, period. In any room you're sitting in, I can point to something right now that a black American helped innovate. All the lights I got on in here, you wouldn't have no lights. It wouldn't have been for the brother Lewis Latimer, who created the carbon filament of the light bulb. Without the carbon filament, the light bulb would have been a piece of glass, because Thomas Edison, he couldn't figure out how to keep it on. You know, we talk about the open heart surgery. We talk about, you know, the traffic light. There's so many different things that we have done to innovate America.
The first blood transfusion done by a black man. The first open heart surgery done by a black man. Oh, yeah. And the list goes on. You can't expect Spanish conquistadors to understand black people and what we did throughout history. Mexico has went out of their way to erase black history. So you can't expect them to understand black history and what we actually done. They don't know. They've been brainwashed by Spanish conquistadors. I'll say that 80% of Mexicans don't even know that a black man created the traffic light that's used all across the world. How come they don't know? Because they've been brainwashed by Spanish conquistadors. And what did Spanish conquistadors do? Erase black history to keep them ignorant.
Black American helped innovate. All the lights I got on in here, you wouldn't have no lights if it wouldn't been for the brother Lewis Latimer, who created the carbon filament of the light bulb. Without the carbon filament, the light bulb would have been a piece of glass, because Thomas Edison, he couldn't figure out how to keep it on. You know, we talk about the open heart surgery, we talk about, you know, the traffic light. There's so many different things that we have done to innovate America. So they don't even want that talked about. So same thing in Latin America. There's a lot of brothers and sisters that help innovate in Latin America. And when y'all talk about, well, why don't we, you know, well, why are we talking about this? We need to be coming together. You can't come together unless you get rid of the anti-black racism. You can't say, don't talk about that, but yet practicing that, because not talking about it is not getting rid of it. There's a lot of my Afro-Latino brothers and sisters in Latin America who have no voice, who have no representation at all. They're not seen on TV. They're not seen in the novellas and all of that. Y'all not putting them on the news networks like talking about. Not like you have the white looking ones with blue eyes and green eyes. Come on, y'all know this. And many of you have sent me messages about this actually. And shout out to y'all, especially on Facebook. Many of you sent me messages about that.
This is fair use, man. I create content to educate the people. You know, unfortunately, most of our LA Black podcasters, they're talking about gang banging in prison, any relevant stuff that's keeping us stuck on stupid. I choose to talk about history and Black empowerment. I'm with the business. Listen, homie, I'm militant, but at the same time, I'm educated when it comes to history. I'm with all that. But I don't believe in gang banging and eliminating our people over stupid stuff that teenagers started in the late 60s and early 70s. Gang banging is a thing of the past now. If you still want to do it in 2026, then you're free to be ignorant. But if you all about this Black empowerment, if you all about educating the people, teaching them how to be militant, feeding them knowledge and wisdom, then you on the same time that I'm on. But talking about gang politics and what goes on in prison every day, that content is keeping our people stuck on stupid. It's keeping us dumb. It's keeping us in a perpetual mind state of ignorance. Now let's get back to the content.
And agree to this stuff is going on and needs to end. It's going to take the younger people, like the same thing I say about in the African continent. It's going to take the younger people in Latin America, whether you're in Mexico, Colombia, Panama, wherever you located, right? It's going to take the young people to end this. Because, you know, unfortunately, sometimes the older people keep things going. Well, the older people, you're going to have to kind of let them do their thing. But you kind of put yourself in a position in a globalized world to say, oh, don't fool with them Black people, because you're going to deal with Black people. Just like somebody could say, oh, well, don't fool with an Asian person, don't fool with an Arab person. We live in a globalized.
Shout out to Sharon. Sharon has blessed us with a beautiful cash app. She said, FBA stand on business, and I appreciate you, Sharon. Shout out to the ladies for sliding through with the major support, and shout out to the brothers who have contributed and supported as well. The thing is, a lot of you brothers who used to support, I don't see y'all anymore, so I'll just replace the people who used to support with the new people who do support. That's what we're going to do. But shout out to Sharon for that beautiful cash app. I appreciate you for your love and support. Yeah.
Society, you're going to have to deal with a whole lot of people, period. Now, previous video, like I said, and I mean that, it don't matter who it is, even a Black person. If you are not rocking with us, we're not going to rock with you, period. That goes to my own community. Nobody's exempt to that conversation, because we don't need people that's against us like that. But for the people in the back of the room, because the people in the back of the room didn't listen in the last video, and I'll repeat it again, no matter who you are, where you come from, if you rock with us and you about, you know, what we talking about, man, we rock with you, period. As individuals, yes, we'll do that. But you got to address the anti-Black racism in Latin America. Now, we don't want to put it all on Mexico, because I've heard Puerto Ricans told me there's certain things go like.
It ain't just Mexico. Anti-Blackness was spread it all across Latin America, because who colonized Latin America? The Spanish conquistadors. So they took that same mindset with them everywhere they go, every country that they colonize. It's in Mexico, it's in El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, Colombia, Venezuela, Cuba, Panama, Costa Rica, is all over Latin America, the anti-black mindset. The Spanish conquistadors indoctrinated them with this anti-black mindset. That is a common thing all across Latin America. It ain't just Mexico.
Down like that in Puerto Rico, that. But for the people in the back of the room, because the people in the back of the room didn't listen in the last video, and I repeated.
Shout out to Malik for the super chat. He says, shout out to you, Red, speaking up for our FBA communities nationwide, my G. And I'm going to continue to do it. I'm going to continue to match hard. I'm going to continue to keep my foot on the gas. You did. It is what it is. Giving you the real, the truth is a bitter pill. Giving you the real, the truth is a bitter pill.
Again, no matter who you are, where you come from, if you rock with us, and you about, you know, what we talking about, man, we rock with you, period. As individuals, yes, we'll do that. But you got to address the anti-black racism in Latin America. Now, we don't want to put it all on Mexico, because I've heard Puerto Ricans tell me that certain things go down like that in Puerto Rico. They got black people in Puerto Rico. I mean, I've heard about that in Colombia. I've heard about that everywhere, especially Brazil. So we don't want to just target Mexico. But what I'm saying is, anti-black racism needs to be called out by Afro-Latinos in those countries. It needs to be spoken out about representation. They need to be on TV. They need to be in the movies. They need to be on the news. They need to be everywhere. Representation definitely matters. And Afro-Latinos in Latin America have not had the proper representation. See, Black America, we have fought for those things. We're not putting up.
Anti-blackness is prevalent all across Latin America. It ain't just Mexico. The Honduras, El Salvador, Panama, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Venezuela, Colombia. Huh? This is why you never see black people in politics in Latin American countries. You can go to any Latin American country. You're not going to see no black people in politics. They have no political representation in Latin America. None at all. Mexico barely added their black population to the census in 2019. So what does that tell you about their anti-blackness? What does that tell you about them erasing black history in Mexico? It speaks volumes.
With people treating us any kind of way. And sometimes people can't stand us because we will not allow people to treat us any kind of way.
Yeah.
And we want our brothers and sisters in Latin America to stand up and say, no, y'all not going to treat us like that no more. You're not going to throw us in a corner and have us poor and destitute, no representation. We're not, thought about or anything. No. You need to have the same movements that we have in America. You know how I feel. I want to work with black people worldwide, period. But it makes no sense to keep up racism, white supremacy. You have to understand that color thing came from that Spaniard. That's where it come from. And that man from Portugal, which are Europeans, both of them. The indigenous peoples of America, Africans, wasn't even having those problems until they showed up.
America was not like that. Mexico didn't have that problem until the Spanish conquistadors showed up. Nowhere in Latin America did they have this problem with anti-blackness until that Spanish conquistador showed up. Prior to the Spanish conquistadors showing up, there was no such thing as anti-blackness in these countries. That mindset was introduced to them by the Spanish conquistadors who colonized them, who conquered the land, and they indoctrinated them with this anti-black mindset. The Spanish conquistadors brought that anti-blackness with them. Prior to the Spanish conquistadors being here, there was no such thing as anti-blackness or anti-black racism. That's who brought that mindset with them, the Spanish conquistadors. So when you hear Mexicans calling you mayate and all this black stuff, they got that indoctrination from the Spanish conquistadors, homie, 100%.
And but they made from that Spaniard and have us poor and destitute, no representation. We're not, thought about or anything. No. You need to have the same movements that we have in America. You know how I feel. I want to work with black people worldwide, period. But it makes no sense to keep up racism, white supremacy. You have to understand that color thing came from that Spaniard. That's where it come from. And that man from Portugal, which are Europeans, both of them. The indigenous peoples of America, Africans, wasn't even having those problems until they showed up and brought they mess over here, which was very, very evil. And unfortunately, even after the Spanish white supremacist is out of there and the Portuguese white supremacist is out of those countries, you still have that thought process there. It's not getting you anywhere. Unification gets you where you need to be. Even the white supremacists understand I got to work with other people. He even understands that. Fighting each other, all it do is leave us poor. It leave us destitute. And sure, I got some of your messages. You say, well, we should be working together and this and that and the third. Well, I told you before, you can't work together if you're not willing to address the anti-black racism.
You cannot work together with a group of people who refuse to address the anti-black racism that comes from their culture, that comes from their country. If they refuse to acknowledge that, it is impossible to work with them.
How could you work together? You can't until you address it, until you deal with it, expose it for what it is. We need, like I say, the other brother that made the video that we covered, and this sister here that made the video. People like them is addressing the issue and problem. They're trying to uproot the problem, but they're being attacked by saying you don't supposed to be discussing this. Why are you talking about our mess? Why are you putting it out on Front Street? It needs to be put out on Front Street. Anyone that has those thought processes need to be put out on Front Street. That's not acceptable. It's not. And if you feel that way, especially if you're in America, the big melting pot, I don't think you should be here feeling like that. You can go back to your home.
Hey. Shout out to my man Lamar. Shout out to Lamar Steven. Appreciate you for the Cash App. He said, man, much love to the FBA family. Salute. And I appreciate you, Lamar, for blessing us with a Cash App. I appreciate you, my brother. And this is the first time that I seen you over here, but I appreciate you for your contribution to this platform. Let's get back to the content, though. It's all love, brother.
If you feel that way, that's how I feel about it. Go for anybody. I say the same thing to the white supremacists too. You don't like black folks, you don't like Hispanics, you don't like Asians, you don't like, well, carry your happy self back to Europe. I said the same thing to them too. People who don't know me, you really don't know how I talk. You need to go ahead and watch my videos. I'm very, very equal opportunity when I speak about issues when it comes to racism, white supremacy, or just people putting, their differences aside, working together, etc. Because yes, I also understand what some of you saying. It would make more sense to work together, but hey,
when Latinos try to say they played a role in hip hop, name one music genre that was made popular by Latinos or Mexicanos that everybody listens to, that influences the world. You can't name one. They grew up in a household listening to Spanish music, unless their family members were listening to the oldies made by foundational Black Americans. But if you pay attention to the music that comes from Latin America and the music they created in the 50s and 60s has nothing to do with hip hop. There's no elements of hip hop in it. Their music has never influenced urban culture. Foundational Black Americans, our music has always influenced urban culture. The music that we created prior to hip hop is what influenced hip hop. This is why when you listen to the early records in hip hop, all of those records are sampling oldies. And who made the oldies? Foundational Black Americans. This is a foolish argument. It is silly at this point. You know damn well that a group of people who come from a Spanish culture, grew up creating Spanish music, had nothing to do with the creation of hip hop. That is bogus. It is bogus that they would even claim to be co-founders of something that has nothing to do with their culture. All you got to do is study their music prior to hip hop. There's no elements of hip hop in it. Their music has never influenced urban culture. Never.
Black America has always wanted to work with everybody. We have stood up for everybody. Our politicians were at the border when the kids was being put in cages. Okay. But some of the big mouths that's on social media, they didn't go down there and defend those kids. We got the whole Congressional Black Caucus supposed to fight for black people, but they down there talking about, hey, we got to fight for these brown kids. So black people have always say, hey, black and brown, black and brown, black and brown. Well, in order for that to work, we got to have brown meet us in the middle. Now, I'm not saying some didn't meet us in history. I'm not talking about like the Brown Panthers or, people like that. That understood certain things. I'm not talking about them, but I'm saying that if you want to have a true coalition, then you have to, meet at the middle. Just like America, when they got allies, they have to meet each other in the middle. If you're not going to do that, then that's when you have the response. Like I say, well, you don't want to work with us. Well, do you, and then we do us, and then that's just the end of it. Because you can't keep operating like this. Because you can't keep also blaming the white supremacists about, oh, well, we was colonized. No, it's not about being colonized at this point. It's not. Slavery ended in Mexico at 1810. Well over 200, years ago, it ended. It should not be having these issues with the Afro-Mexicans whatsoever. They deserve to have every opportunity like everybody else. I say end it. I definitely would like to, talk to all my brothers and sisters in these countries, in which that's what I plan on doing in the future, is to visiting these brothers and sisters and get it directly from them, how they live and how things could be better. Because if you don't expose this stuff, this is how we got free. Because if you don't talk about it, if you don't expose it, if you don't put it on Front Street, you'll stay in the same position. And that's what I say
if
to
you don't expose it, they'll pretend like it never happened. For centuries, Mexico denied the existence of Afro-Indigenous people, which is why they barely added their Afro-Indigenous people to the census in 2019. For centuries, Mexico denied that they had a Afro-Indigenous population. This is why they kept these people out of the census. Huh?
Afro-Latino brothers and sisters, talk about what's going on, expose it, shine a light on it. That's the only way it's going to stop. But y'all, let me know in the comments y'all think about, this particular sister here, giving her.
Shout out to Phil Scott, man, and I appreciate everybody. Listen, man, I used some clips. Shout out to Joseph. He said, stay on their necks. Black Bear mod. I will mod you, Black Bear, because you've been supporting. So what we're going to do is we're going to have some new mods. A lot of people who used to mod my channel, they barely show up. So we're going to get rid of them and bring in some of the new people who's been supporting consistently. I appreciate people for supporting my channel, but I don't want people to have wrenches. Like if you barely show up to my channel, then there's really no need to have a wrench over here. Wrenches will be for my loyal people who tap in. Not saying you got to tap in every day, but if you tap in every blue moon, then there's no need to have a wrench on my channel. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the wrenches away from people who barely show up to support. There's no need for them to have wrenches over here. But all my people that's been supporting, all the people that's been rocking with me lately consistently, those are the people who will have wrenches on my platform. And I appreciate you all. So this is what I'm going to do, man. I'm going to cut this show short. And I'm going to do a part 2. I'm still going to do a part 2 about the Hebrew Israelite versus Saint and Sinner. We're going to do a part 2 to that. Part 2 will be a panel show. I'll bring some people up to speak. I'm going to do a part 2 to this. Part 2 to this show will be a panel show, and I'll bring some people up to speak. We are monetized over here, so I don't have time for people using vulgar language and talking stupid. If you don't have enough discipline to leave profanity out of your language, you will not be a part of my panel. I won't even bring you up. This conversation is for people with discipline and people who can. This conversation is for people with discipline, people who know how to control their mouth and emotions. Those are the only people that I'm going to drop the link for. If you're talking stupid using profanity, you will be blocked. You will be dropped from the panel. I promise you. Make sure that you guys bless the like button. It ain't nothing. I appreciate all of my loyal contributors. I appreciate all of my loyal supporters. It's King Supreme, heavy in the game with the knowledge and wisdom. And we're going to keep smashing. Giving you the real. The truth is a bitter pill. I'll catch up with you guys later on.